Hi, I'm Kenneth Wajda. I'm a professional photographer here in Colorado. Welcome to another one of my weekly photo chats. So today I want to talk about a photographer. I didn't know him, and I just found him through a talk on a video through the School of Visual Arts, and I was fascinated by him. His name is Richard Sandler, and he was a street photographer and still is, but he was working from the 70s and 80s all the way up to today, making street photos in New York City. And he was walking around with Lee Friedlander and Gary Winogrand and Bruce Gilden. And these guys all bumped into each other, he said, all the time. And we would walk together and we would partner up and walk side by side. And I just love the fact that the idea that the people that you're working with now, the people you're working with, could all become known photographers in the book world. Again, not famous, but known in amongst the photo peers. And he was one of those photographers, and I didn't know his name. There was a guy who worked his whole life to get somewhere, and he made books. And up until this week, I never even heard of him. But his name is Richard Sandler. I'll put a link to the video, which I thought was so well done, because he talked about the things that made him want to document street and the way he went about it. And at one point he said something that really blew my mind, which I loved. He said he was working one day out on the street and he ran into Gary Winogrand, and Gary said, "Hey, while you're working, whatever you see, make the best photo of it you possibly can, because it can only get better." Because the element of time makes street documentary photographs more valuable. And he probably could look back to photographs from Walker Evans from the 30s and 40s and how people were responding to them, and the photos of Robert Frank from the 50s and 60s and how people were responding to them. And now he's working in the 70s and 80s, and he's going, make those photographs, because as time goes on, they appreciate. The photographs you make now only get better. So make them as good as you can now, so that now they have a head start to becoming those great photographs. And I really saw a real truth in that. There was a time when I had first moved to my previous town, and to get to know the local businesses and to find out who was where, I went around to all the businesses and I did one photograph of the interior and one photograph of the exterior, and I made up a website that was a tourist website for the town. And every business ended up having an interior and exterior photo made. And then that website was up for 8 or 10 years, and then it seemed like people weren't using it, so I brought it down. And I wasn't updating it, so it was time to go. But then another 5 years go by, and then I stumbled on the folder which had those photographs. So I posted those onto a Facebook group that was for that town, and people were through the roof excited. They got to see the pie place that no longer is there. They got to see the Italian restaurant where they met their spouse. They saw the old bike shop. These were just the ordinary pictures of these places. They were shot proficiently. I know how to frame an exterior and an interior, but it wasn't the photography that they were responding to. It was their memory. It was their connection. I remember when I played in a band, I used to say, we are playing cover songs. We're playing Rolling Stones, and we're playing The Who, and we're playing the Talking Heads and the Pretenders. You know, they're not coming here to listen to us and to look at us as rock stars. They're here to dance and to relive where they were when they heard these songs. They're coming here to experience those songs that are meaningful to them, that we're able to hopefully play with some proficiency. But we're not the rock stars. It's not about us. It's really about them. And the same is true for those photographs of the pie place. It wasn't about the photograph, it was about them. And looking back at photographs of Street from 1975, it's not just about who's in those photographs. It's, I was alive in 1975 and I walked those streets. And I remember being there and seeing that. And I don't see that anymore. And I want to see it again. And I want to see those cars from the 70s because they had a different style. They were maybe bolder colors. Maybe they had more interesting shapes and designs. I want to go and revisit those. I don't get to see that now when I look across the street at that Honda Accord. And photography can only get better as it ages. So there's a wonderful nugget to know. So Richard Sandler's inspiring because he's another one of those photographers who was shooting little moments of pure randomness and finding a way to turn it into something artful. And I really liked his work. I hadn't heard of him. I don't know his book or his books. And I'm glad to add him to my list of names to watch out for when I'm perusing bookstores. I might come across a book of his. And I really appreciate that he shared that information because for me, that really resonates. All we can do is the best work we can and then let it go. Time will tell whether it's worthy of a book. Like even a gentleman like Fred Herzog. He worked all his life. His work shooting Kodachromes in Vancouver in the 50s and 60s, they weren't discovered until he was in his 60s. And now he's a known photographer. Again, known amongst his peers. There's nobody in my town who would ever have heard of him. But he has probably more than one monograph out. And the point is, he's a celebrated photographer in the photography world, but only because he did the work, and the work aged, and then people found it. Vivian Maier made work that was beautiful, but some of what we're responding to is it's 1950. It's 1960. It's Rolleiflex with big old fur coats and suits and hats that people don't wear now. Time makes it better. Vivian may be the most brilliant photographer by not putting out her work and then having it discovered later. If she had put it out when she was making it, maybe nobody would care and nobody would still care. But because it was found and it got the story, now it's got the story. It's got the magic. Look what we found. I found the pie place. Look at that. So take a look at the video. It's an hour, 20 minutes long, and I watched the whole thing. I just couldn't stop. And I found it thoroughly entertaining, and I'm glad to have a new photographer to look up work and follow, Richard Sandler. All right, that's today's photography talk. If you're enjoying these, hit the subscribe button. If you can support even with a coffee or a beer a month, that would be most welcome. Thank you so much for all my patrons, and I will be back next week. We'll talk photography. As always, here's the good light.